Everyone, welcome back to OTD Military History. Very excited to have today's live stream. We had a little bit of a hiccup with it last time, and then we did a great AMA that I really enjoyed and everyone seemed to like, and that was great because I wasn't expecting to do one, so it was really fun to do it on the fly in the best way possible, and hopefully everyone was okay with my answers. But without further ado, tonight we are talking about the Cold War exhibit that's going to be coming to the Canada Aviation Space Museum. It's always a mouthful to say, so sometimes it's just chasm. If that's said, that's what that means for tonight. And they're based in Ottawa, and they have a great collection. Just talking to our guests tonight about this, and maybe we'll have some stuff plans in the future about showing off what they have, because they have some unique pieces that I know are extremely unique and not everyone knows about them. But tonight our focus will be on the Cold War exhibit, as always. If you have questions about anything, sidebar as usual, and we'll answer them the best we can. I know some of the details on this stuff is still undetermined and still trying to keep it quiet, but we'll get our guest tonight, Erin Gregory, to answer them as best as possible. So thanks for coming on, Erin. I really appreciate it, coming on, taking time out of your busy schedule to come on and talk to us all. It's really appreciated by me, and I know everyone watching.
Welcome. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so like I said, well, I was just going to say I'm relatively new to Ottawa, even though I'm not really anymore. Not from here originally, as most people know. But the museum, right? I didn't know too much about it. I went to it years and years and years ago, a long time ago when I was a kid, and then a little bit older than that. I hadn't really been there much. So when I kind of got the first, living here and getting into that, I was obviously, as people know, I've been kind of just a aviation nerd and loving the hardware plane stuff. So it was just great walking in there and seeing everything. I mean, we can maybe talk a bit about the collection as we move forward. And a lot of people know, not my specialty per se, but the Cold War. And as I was explaining to you, and as a lot of people know, when I start, I ask, why do you do what you do? But in this case, you work for a museum. So why is the museum focusing on redoing the Cold War exhibit at this present time?
At this time. Well, there's actually a couple reasons for it. It is one of the areas in the museum. One of the things that we've realized over the last decade or so is that when the museum was originally set up in the new building, I want to say the new building, it was built in 1988. It's not exactly a new building, but the original site of the museum was 3 Second World War hangars and some aircraft outside. So when this very triangular building was built, the back end of it was actually just open storage. In 2005, we got a reserve hangar. So some of our large aircraft that had been outside for way too long were now in the hangar, and we were able to reshuffle the museum and make all of it into more of a gallery. So in our floor is wide open. So we don't have blocked off rooms that you would call like a proper museum gallery. So you walk in, it's all one main gallery, but we have our aircraft organized on what we call islands, and those islands are thematic. So some of them are very kind of time period focused. So First World War, Second World War, for example, they've got a very finite time frame. Some cover multiple decades, like early aviation and bush flying. And then the Cold War is sort of about almost a third of our floor space that isn't dedicated to events. So it's a very large area. But when the museum was reorganized, there was very little context invested in that section. And that was true kind of all over the museum. So we are making an effort to kind of revisit each island as an opportunity presents itself to create more context. One of the reasons we're doing this is because of our audience. So increasingly, the audience at the museum is changing and shifting from being an enthusiast-based audience, who are the wing nuts, as we affectionately call them, and that. So initially, that was sort of how the museum was built. It was for aviation enthusiasts by aviation enthusiasts. So you didn't need to tell people really all that much about anything. They were there just for the airplanes. You're not going to tell them anything they don't already know. But for everybody who comes along with them, they might need to, right? So there are a lot of people, for example, that don't even realize that there were airplanes flying in the First World War. So you need to kind of tell them that and explain, what was going on with like the whole learning curve around that situation. Also the materials and structures. People don't realize that aircraft used to be made out of wood and fabric and stuff. So there's a lot of things that you need to be able to contextualize for people who have no idea about any of this. And that's also like a sustainability piece for us, right? Because as we move along, we are finding our traditional audience is getting much older. And the people who are now coming are families with young children. And so we need to be able to engage those people just as well as we engage those who come specifically for the collection. So we're trying to strike a balance between the two, and kind of just better contextualize all our planes and also humanize them. So giving people a point of connection that isn't the technology, that isn't the hardware, because that's always going to be there for the people who want it, but trying to give other people ways to get interested and invested in the museum and the collection. So the Cold War was a space in the museum that desperately needed this kind of context. And the types of aircraft that are in there right now, it's mainly a gallery of the Cold War fighter planes. Right. So we don't have any large transports from that period of time. It used to be called the Jet Age, that area. Right. And so we decided that when the opportunity came up to potentially put some money into this area, we're thinking, okay, we're not going to, this isn't the Jet Age, because the Jet Age is kind of synonymous with commercial aviation, right? And the advent of the jumbo jets and that sort of thing, right? That's the I guess the pop culture kind of aspect of that. And obviously these are all military jets, but really what it is a Cold War gallery. So we decided at this point, we're just going to call a spade, and this is what we're going to do. As far as the exhibition goes, they're all RCAF aircraft. So the thread of the exhibition then becomes very obvious that this is really about the RCAF in the Cold War. And what do we want to say, about that?
Right.
The funding was sort of an interesting story. And a lot of that actually came from our partnership with the OEX Recovery Group back in 2017, when they were looking for the Avro Aero free flight models in Lake Ontario. So as part of our involvement with that project, we had an opportunity to do some fundraising with people who are already, engaged in the story and invested in the search. And part of that was for us to kind of revamp the aero display and also to display more, not just the nose that we have on display and a couple of the engines, things like that, but to display whatever was recovered from the search, and then also some of the other aero parts that we have in the collection, of which there are many. And so we're hoping to be able to put as many of those out as possible, including some new acquisitions. So that was sort of the funding piece. And then we've gotten bits of funding from other sources and stuff as well. So in the end, we've been able to rethink that space quite a lot. And so that the context for it will be pretty thorough. And we also kind of had the opportunity to pair this with the centenary of the RCAF. So the opening date for the exhibition, everybody can block their calendars now, should you be interested, is April 4th, 2024.
Perfect.
Just in time. That makes it very tight. And I'm very, very aware that is less than 10 months away. So.
Can I just, is the 4/4/24 on purpose?
Well, you know what? It would be really great to say yes, but no. It's mainly because the first is on Easter Monday, so nobody's doing that.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody does an exhibition opening on a Monday anyway, so it's always got to be a Thursday night, and that happens to work out super well. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I guess that's true. I forgot the dates for next year because, again, like I was talking to you, and people know I work with the RCA Foundation. Yeah. So we're keeping that date is in my head, like April 1st, 2024, even though I'm working with them part-time, is burned in my brain. Like that's the deadline. That's what we got to focus on. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's going to be a busy week.
Oh yeah, it's going to be lots going on. Hopefully I can sneak away and come to the opening.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'm not too busy. We'll see. But yes, so that's great. Actually, before we move on, and I think maybe someone will probably end up asking it anyway, because you mentioned the Aero already, and some new pieces that might be shown. Can you tell us what those are? Or
Yeah, I can. So one of the things that we have that's never been on public display before are the wingtips from RL203. So they've been in our reserve hangar. Some people who have done that tour have seen them on the tour route, but they've never been on the museum floor specifically. So we're in the process now of building new mounts for them so that they can be separated, because right now they're kind of sandwiched onto this one very not the best mount, I guess. Anyways, so they've recently traveled from the hangar, and like this will be difficult to picture for people who haven't been here, but two of our employees had to put them on casters, right? Put this whole mount and these two wings on casters and basically duck them under the wings of one of the aircraft in the hangar, get them out, cross our delta and taxiway, come around the building into the parking lot, and then bring it into a restoration hangar to be worked on. So that was very cool. So we're going to put one of those pieces on display. And then the other thing that we're putting out are two ejection seats, a pair of ejection seats from RL203 as well, that I had the privilege of acquiring 2 years ago. And the story even with those ejection seats is pretty cool. So while there are ejection seats from Aeros in other museums, we are the only one that has a pair from the same airplane. I think we're the only one who has a pair, period, and then we're definitely the only one that has a pair from the same airplane. And then it just happened to be that they came from the same plane as the wingtips, which was great. So that was a nice coincidence.
That's a nice touch to have. I was going to say, because I've seen them. Well, I know there's one in the War Museum.
And Hamilton has one as well. And stuff, but that's it. Usually people only have the one. And sometimes they weren't even one that was in one of the 6 complete prototype aircraft. But
so again, I just want to keep on the Aero just for a little bit, if that's okay. Obviously it has a huge place in
hearts and minds.
Hearts and minds, I guess that's a good way to put it. I might steal that one actually, because I was going to say mythology, but that's not the right word. You know,
I mean, it is a little bit,
A little bit. I mean,
it's emotional.
Canadian
lore.
No. Anyway, it's popular, and this is going to kind of lead into the question after that. But we are again, because I kind of know what the plan was, and we just talked about it before we started. Is how, and we just got a really good question. I'll lead up with that actually after this, because they're connected historically and thematically. Is how will it be displayed? Are we going to try and make, because again, for those who don't know, like they were destroyed. They were all destroyed. Are you going to try and make it look kind of like a plane again? Are they going to be on their own? Are they going to be spread around? Like kind of what's the, at least at this point, like what's the idea, you know?
So we had considered that, what would it be like if we put the 2 wingtips on either side of the nose, for example, kind of, in exactly the same configuration as it would be relatively properly spaced out. Unfortunately, we did not have the room for that. I'm certain that our budget would not cover that, because as you can imagine, suspending those wings from the ceiling would be pretty expensive.
That'd be pretty high to do from,
pretty tough. But what we are going to look at doing, probably not for the opening is my guess, but eventually our idea is to utilize AR and be able to line up some sort of device, whether it's tablet or cell phone or something like that, in the museum from a certain point. You could capture the aircraft on the screen, and then the rest of the airplane would blow out so that you could see it in its entirety, right? Just to get an idea of scale, because it is kind of hard to appreciate the size of that aircraft with just the pieces that we have. So, we have the largest pieces in existence with the nose of RL206 and then the wingtips of 203. But it's, when you look at them individually, and I think one of the things we're trying to hammer home with the wings is like, this is just the tip of the wing, right? Like this is not the whole thing. So this was, just try to communicate that the scale of it is a bit of a challenge. But so that would be our probably our only way of showcasing that. The space is pretty tight in the back corner where it's going to go. So we are relocating the nose of the arrow from the front of the Cold War exhibition, which borders on our big event floor, to the back of the museum. The reason that we're doing that is, again, for context, because while the arrow nose was very prominently displayed and photographed in these event spaces, we were finding that a lot of people were actually just bypassing it altogether and not even realizing that it was there, because it kind of got blended in with a pillar in the back and the two aircraft that were beside it. And there was nothing really drawing you to say like, hey, this is the arrow. So people would come and just not even see it. But what we're going to do now is take it to the back of the museum, where we have the CF-100 there. The Iroquois engine is there. The wingtips will be back there already. And then we have the Beaumark missile, and then the Voodoo is kind of across the way. So all together, all those objects really tell kind of a fulsome tale of the arrow. I'm saying the Voodoo just because that was considered as the aircraft before the arrow. Apparently didn't meet the specs that they wanted, but then ended up being the replacement for it anyways. And so
I'm gonna say, be careful what word you use, because they'll get people upset. It's not the replacement. It's not the same.
There was a substitute.
Yeah. Oh, well, that was the question, actually, was about the Beaumark, because I was gonna, again, and not criticizing, because I love the museum. It's just the Beaumark is gigantic. It's literally just in the current configuration, or when I was there last, which granted was a while ago. It's gigantic, and it's white, and it's at the back, and it just kind of like it
blends in.
But it blends in, but I could see it too. You know what I mean? I understand exactly what you're talking about. If you're not sure what you're looking at for the arrow and what you might think it looks like based on pictures or whatever, just the Beaumark was interesting to me, because it's just it's huge. Like, it's just so big, especially for the Canadian context, where we don't really have that as part of the military in the Air Force's arsenal, basically, back in the day. So it's just really interesting thing. But I guess that kind of explains it. And it'll be tied in with the arrow. Is that the plan to talk about that at all, or?
Yeah, so we talk about NORAD and SAGE, and then the Beaumark has its own console. So we're not doing like a deep dive on missiles in general, and like you could say a lot about that, but this particular section of the exhibition is kind of a beast already for everything we need to talk about in the space that we have. So we're being very choosy about what we can talk about in all of these areas, but the general flow of it is kind of detection and interception are sort of the two cornerstones of the defense of North America. So we're kind of digging into that. And then the arrow and the CF-100 and the Beaumark, when I guess and the Voodoo to a degree, are all discussed kind of in that framing. So they're the interception part of that bit. And then we have, another section that talks about the lines of defense with the radar stations and then all of that. So
okay, because I was going to ask, because I've been doing lots of work on, like we were talking about earlier, but on the NORAD sites and the DO line, and I'm inadvertently becoming like a DO line nerd. I wasn't interested in it before, really, to be honest. Just knowing it generally and what it was, and cover that PhD, checkbox for the comprehensive exam type of information. But now I'm becoming like really interested in it, because I've seen literally thousands of photos, and I've researched a ton of it. So
it's hard not to be. It's a type of thing, like, it sucks you in. It's a weird thing that I've discovered as well, because again, like, I was like you know about it, because okay, whatever. And I was thinking like, I'm not going to tell like the the construction story and the engineering story and like whatever and stuff. That was really hard not to, because it is very cool.
It's so cool. I mean, it's a bit of an aside, but the audience loves an aside. And As a Rabbit Hole is another popular channel likes to say about these things, is just the time period that it spans is what interests me, because it took so long, because obviously it's so difficult. But it's so funny to see World War II landing craft bringing in supplies to build this, detection line that's state of the art at the time. It's a great story, and there's so many crazy stories about it. And anyway, it's not
within like 8 years.
Yeah.
We'll keep it running for another 30. Just
seeing the computers. This is a good question, because I knew about one of the other exhibits you guys have there is a map. Is that going to be part of it? Is that going to be integrated? Is it going to be kind of bright and shiny.
So we're not doing, like, we have an infographic that will talk about that infrastructure. So that, yeah, it'll be a map of sorts, but some of the information that'll be included in it will be, the dates of operation, for example, because even just trying to say, like, what is a headquarters when, and who's responsible for what, and what gets built when, and who's staffing what when, is also a very interesting thing for all those radar lines, right? And also who funds it. So it's part of that story, right? So just trying to frame the Mid Canada line as the, the answer to the concerns about Canadian sovereignty in all of this American investment in defense infrastructure all across the country. Then it's just like, okay, like, we need to kind of step up here, but we don't want to pay for the DO line because that's super expensive. So let's figure out another way to do this.
Yeah, it's such an interesting story with, again, so much going on. And anyway, a bit of a digression. Real quick question here, because I have no idea. The velvet glove missile, anything on that?
Yeah, so we do have velvet glove artifacts in the collection. We have a few complete missiles, and we have parts for sure. We're not actually putting any of them on display, unfortunately, and that's mostly just a space issue. So we're just trying to go, like, high level with it. But one of the pieces that will be on display that's kind of an in-between is the Delta test vehicle, the thing that was recovered from Lake Ontario through the Raise the Arrow project. So that's on display in the hangar right now, but will be out there. So anyways, just related because it was fired from the same place at Point Peter. And interestingly, like, I guess the fuselage of the DTV is very similar, right? So it's just like parts that were lying around from that test program and other test programs, and they kind of just like, well, what happens if we slap some Delta wings on it? So it's
you're not wrong. I mean, you're not wrong. Because I did some research into that too. The point, literally, I really need to go there because it's not that far, and I go to Kingston all the time. It's far away.
Yeah, I've never been myself, but it's very cool. And like that story in and of itself, trying to communicate everything that we did, because actually when it was recovered, we didn't really know what it was. It was just this airplane-like thing that we thought maybe was a free flight model, but then once we got it cleaned up, this is not that. So then, like, what is it? So it took us about 2 years of research and like, we have like radiographs of that object and all this sort of stuff, right? And so we did a combination of, like, reading the artifact, what does the artifact itself tell us about it, and then archival documents, none of which were like a smoking gun, but enough to really point towards this being kind of the precursor to the free flight model program. So I argue that it was basically CARDI trying to demonstrate that it could put off the free flight model program at the point for Avro. So anyway, we'll see if somebody proves me wrong in however many years, but that's the hypothesis at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one to research. It's a bit of frustrating because I try to find some stuff myself, real basic, because but the Twitter stuff, it's just basic high level this is a story, somebody else do the work. But I was gonna say the photos are so interesting because it seems so slapdash, and because it was.
Absolutely. And yet the models themselves, especially once they got to the very sophisticated one, like, they had Avro's model shop completely blocked up for a year, and it cost like hundreds of thousands of dollars to build those models, only to just like blow them up in the lake, basically. Literally.
Well, a couple of them literally blew up. Sorry, I just want to make sure I didn't. Okay, so we got that perfect. This is an interesting question. Hopefully it's not too difficult because I have no idea how to answer that one. So better you than me. So what are the challenges in explaining international command and control of nuclear warheads to an audience who doesn't have any pre-knowledge of the subject?
The challenges are great. The great and many.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of the deal with museum stuff anyways, right? So basically, when I have a subsection of an exhibition, I have on average 3 text levels, one of which is about 80 words. The second one is 60 words. The third one is 40 words. So you're at, what, just over 200 words that you can, or just under 200 words that you can use. Yeah, about 180 words. And then I've got 4 photo captions, which can be about 30 words each. And then some artifact captions, which can be between 20 and 40 words each. So explaining really challenging concepts burn through that word count very quickly. So we try as much as we can not to, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, yeah. Sorry, just jumping, give you a bit of a break there for a second. It does make sense if you, because again, that was when I started working at the War Museum for the first time. One of the many times I worked there. There's a huge display in the work area about the basics of design and what communicates and what's the best way to do it, and it just kind of blew my mind. And like, it's one of those things, I like to say this on just historical things in general. It's once you sit and think about it, you're like, of course that makes sense. Like, of course that's how it should be, or that's the way it's done this way, because that's just what the parameters are. There are so many limitations. You can only do so much, but it's not an easy one to explain, even in a dissertation, let alone in a museum.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. So we try as much as possible to generalize without becoming inaccurate.
Yes.
And just keep things as high level as possible. So for example, well, like, let's say some of the very complex things that we would maybe think of a different way of presenting that. So perhaps it's not a didactic panel, so you're not using text, but maybe it's a video. Maybe it's an infographic. Maybe there's some other type of communication medium that we can employ to really get to the heart of it. But one of the things that we really like to think about is how important is it for someone to know that? Right. So like, is that critical to their understanding of this period, or is that kind of superfluous? So for us, that statement is always what we call the big idea. And so the big idea of this exhibition is almost like the thesis statement of a paper, but it also serves as a filter. So you are kind of proving that argument, but also anything that doesn't fit into that band is not a part of the conversation. So for us, the big idea with the Cold War exhibition is that the Cold War was a time of technological, operational, and social change for the RCAF. So that's all we're talking about, really, in that space. So because and this is particularly useful in a period like the Cold War, because it spans so much time and there's so many things that happen both like within Canada and outside, and it's the politics of it, the military structures of it are just so complicated. Two things that we decided that we would explain in some detail were NATO. We felt that was an important one for commitment, right? What were our commitments to NATO? What is NATO? Why is it important? And one of the deciding factors for that was also like, what's happening today, right? So like NATO, this is obviously in the wake of the Russia-Ukraine war. This is a very important piece of history that's being utilized, for good now, and it obviously has some newfound. I mean, it's always been relevant, but has much more relevance now in
the headlines.
Light of this. Yeah, in light of this. So explaining why Article 5 is important, why having certain countries become members is important strategically and geopolitically, and then NORAD.
Yes.
So those two things are kind of the, these two anchoring bits. We will talk a little bit about the UN, but not in the same level of detail as these two bits. So.
Yeah, which makes sense to me, given the RCAF's heavy NATO focus. I mean, it's just bluntly saying it. That's the way it was. So I am getting to the thing we want to talk about, but I have a question. I think this is kind of an unavoidable one for me, and again, going back to limitations in space and the current artifacts and the new artifacts that'll be put on display in the revamped gallery. Is there a plan to do a digital component that will be paired with the physical gallery? Is there a big plan for that? Will it be complementary? Are they being developed together? Anything you can share? And this is just me because I'm a big, obviously, digital history nerd.
Yeah, sure. So initially we were hoping to kind of do something concurrently, but because of the timeline, we're not able to devote the kind of resources that what we had envisioned. So we're going to do it after. So at some point there will be kind of a complementary digital piece to it. So we were hoping to utilize things like object recognition and image recognition, so that if you came up to a uniform, for example, and what we can only tell you, whatever we can say in 40 words about this individual and all that, which obviously isn't enough. And it's really unfortunate in some ways. It's extremely limiting. But we could do, a much deeper dive on this person. We could access oral histories or videos of this person and kind of build out a real profile for people. And so we're hoping to be able to do that. And then also utilize some features to create with the objects, like a lift the panel. What does an engine look like when it's operating inside this particular aircraft, or in some of the aircraft like the Sabre, where you can't really see the engine, you see the engine intake and then that's it. So just being able to, blow apart some of these panels and kind of see what's underneath, or 360 views of cockpits and things like that again you can't really see and stuff like that. So yeah, we definitely have plans. Some of the things that will be on the floor, we are going to do an interesting interactive on the dew line. So we're returning to that. So we're hoping to actually create a walkthrough of one of the dew line sites, and then it'll kind of explain the different structures and kind of how they were used and the history of them and all that sort of stuff. And then we will have another kind of interesting piece, which is basically a full-size basement fallout shelter that you can go into. So that's kind of the other big piece that we're looking at doing. And there may be some other things that come up, but again, it'll depend on decisions that have to be made, as I was saying before, when our blue sky dreams meet the budget. So that doesn't work out.
Yeah, unfortunate, but that's just the reality of the museum game.
And the digital stuff is expensive, right? That's the other thing. It's surprisingly expensive. So if you can do it, it's one thing for me to put together some content about it, but then there's got to be a person in the middle who packages that content in such a way, and then the person on the other side that sort of matches that with whatever software and hardware that is required to actually present it. So it does take quite a bit of time, and it's like another project in and of itself. And so we're hopeful. And actually, we're hoping that kind of system will be something that we can carry forward to the rest of the museum as well, to be able to, do some deep dives on different things that people would find interesting.
Well, hopefully somebody with the Canadian military history theme YouTube channel might be able to come over and get some footage. And maybe do a little dive into some things. I don't know. Maybe if we can find someone who has something like that.
I think we might.
Anyway. Yeah, of course. It's not easy. That's the thing, right? The digital stuff, it seems easy once you use it because it's so intuitive and it's so accessible, most of it, that the behind the scenes is just bonkers. Is the best way to describe it. So just a quick question, actually, because I wasn't sure about this one, but I think it's a good question to ask. Will it, again, we know about the limitations, but is there going to be any explanation of Canada's objection to becoming a nuclear power? At all?
we don't dig into that very much. One thing that we do talk about is the objection of some parts of the Canadian population to the civil defense strategy, largely because they don't agree with anybody being a nuclear power. So we're talking about mostly like it's not the government, so not a government policy, but just people objecting. People objecting even to what was going on already. So we talk about in particular, this protest that happened in Debert, Nova Scotia, which was really interesting. So that was fun. And it's just, we've actually been able to make contact with some of the people who were there participating in the protest, which, and I have to say, like, actually, that's been one of the really cool things about working on this time period, as opposed to, you know, what I've done in the past, which is that so many people are still living, so they're still around. You can access their lived experience of this period, and that's been really cool.
Well, that was going to be that perfect lead in. You did my job for me. That was going to be my next question: is what is going to be done in terms of that? Are we going to get interviews with vets, with people working on the DO line? The protesters, anything like that? Is there going to be an oral history component in that way? Are we going to be telling stories of individuals? Is there anything you tell us what that might look like?
So what we've been doing is kind of just accessing people's experiences and approaching families for some people. So say, for example, we found a jacket of somebody who had served in with 426 Squadron in Korea.
Right.
They had a Second World War career as well as a pilot, and but then in the post-war period in Korea, they were flying with 246.
I should know who that is. I should know who that is.
AJ Byford.
Yeah.
So he, anyways, really interesting, long career, and that. So we found a jacket of his that he had donated to the museum back in the 90s, but we didn't really have much else from him, and didn't have any photos. So the assistant curator for the area tracked down one of his children and asked, you know, do you happen to have any family or any family photos or photos of your father when he was serving and all that sort of stuff. And as it turned out, their mother had recently passed and had given the daughter, you know, basically all of these photos. So she's actually coming to the museum this week, and we're going to take a look and scan some of them. So that's been the way we've been working with some families. And then one of the stories that we're looking to tell in this area, what was it? We've got a couple of them, but a lot of it has been about like working with families and working with the communities that are invested in this. And then we'll have a person that's usually kind of I wouldn't say representative of a whole or anything like that, but we you know, have examples, I guess.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Of, you know, folks that are participating in different things. So one of them is Brigadier General Sheila Hellstrom. So she's Canada's first female general. She came up through the Air Force. She'd been serving since 1954. It was one of the very few women who made it through the 50s without getting released. Yep. So anyway, she was just a really, really impressive woman, but also a really excellent like documentarian of all of her stuff. So she kept everything. So she had the uniforms from like all different periods and all that sort of stuff. So after she passed away in December 2020, I'd worked with a community of service women to look at her estate and figure out, you know, where some of these things might go. And so we collected about 44 objects of hers. And so some of them will be on display. So in the serving overseas section, I have some things that she acquired while she was serving in Metz in France in 60, 61. And then her general's uniform from the 80s, which is in another section where we talk about women in the RCAF and what their experience was like through the Cold War. So that part has been really cool. And then we're also doing a little bit on aviation medicine and the way that changes in the Cold War because of the technological and operational shifts. So obviously this requires a bit of a shift there. So we've worked with the family of Major Stephen Blizzard, who was one of the I call them the flying physicians, where, you know, they were doctors that got to get their wings and just a better experience what their patients were dealing with and stuff. So I've got some objects from him, so things like that. So it's not necessarily that we have oral history videos and things like that with these folks, because unfortunately a lot of them have actually passed away. But those that have been that have been available. We are hoping to kind of do little bits here and there where we can, to put together some video footage. And again, a lot of this may end up living in that digital realm, because it'll be a lot easier. Like on the floor, people will give you at a video kiosk, they'll give you about a minute, 30 seconds to watch.
That long. Okay.
Right? So, well, and I mean, that's somebody who's invested.
I was going to say 45 seconds, but yeah, that's pretty
good. It's really slight. And so we're kind of, making a bit of a value judgment there of how many people are actually going to utilize that, versus at least seeing the photos and seeing the objects. I think that's really going to be the heart of this exhibition, is just encountering these objects that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see at our museum, right? Because this type of thing hasn't been on display in the past. So some of that is like I was saying to you before, we have, sort of the usual suspects, and then we have the surprise kind of stories that I hope people will like.
Yeah, well, I was going to say we got some questions here, but I'm hoping to come back to them, because like we just said there, the surprise or things you've never seen before, that's kind of the initiative of what started this live stream in the first place. Can you tell us about that initiative? Can you just explain? You can explain it way better than I can, of what the initiative and the impetus for this live stream was.
Sure. So we're talking about particularly like NATO commitments in Europe and what that looked like for the RCAF. And then a colleague of mine named Al English had mentioned this bit about I'm sure you know Al, because the man's prolific and he's amazing. So he had been writing this article about family life on the bases in Europe, and I thought, like, well, that's really interesting, and people don't really talk about that side of things and what it was like. And we had been, talking at the museum in the past about like how we represent military families, which we don't typically, because the types of objects that we collect tend to be from the service member themselves. And then, because of that, that's what gets displayed, and their family sacrifices don't really get acknowledged either. But it's like when one person serves, the whole family does in one way or another, because they are either moving for postings, or they are, without that member of their family for the length of a posting, or whatever. But no matter what, it has impacts on that family. And the Europe one, I mean, I know so many, the quote unquote base brats, right? That just like, oh yeah, I know, we spent like 2 years over here, or 4 years over there, or wherever, and stuff. And it's just like, to me, that was actually a really cool story and a really neat experience. And, this is the first time that the RCAF is operating bases overseas anyway.
Right.
And then also the first time that family members are allowed to accompany service members on their posting. So just the communities that build up around those bases, the schools, the Girl Guide troops, the Boy Scouts, like all this stuff. But there's so many interesting things that happen there. And then contact with the locals also, right? And participating in those kinds of rituals and stuff like that. So what we've done is ask for, do like a pull out, like a call out for people to share their family photos. So if you had experience growing up on any of these bases, would you be willing to share those experiences with us, which our goal is to basically put a bunch of these photos on a loop on a screen in the exhibition, so that we can kind of showcase that aspect of life on the bases, and talk about the family experience of serving. And to that end, we did manage to get some artifacts from some families who kept things that they got while over, mostly in Germany. We haven't really found anything from France, but I've got Sheila's stuff from France. So yeah, we think we've got them covered. But it's been really neat. So some of the photos that have come up have been really cool, and we've got some complementary like research projects happening as well, just to look into the experience of childhood on the bases overseas, for example, and stuff like that. So I think it'll be very cool in the end. But yeah, that call out is still live. We're still looking for more photos, and the more we have, it'll be it'll be a better experience, I think, for everybody. So
Yeah. Is there an end date for the submissions? I guess. Yeah.
not yet.
Okay.
I don't think we've completely closed it yet. I think once it'll probably be in the fall would be my guess.
That makes sense.
Yeah, just so that's when we start working on the interactives and everything. But
yeah,
cool.
So this leads to a question. Brody Shaw is mentioning this. Is his father was posted in West Germany, but was Army. Now you mentioned RCAF. This just leads to a question. So if, say, someone served in the Army but took photos of planes, is that something you guys are interested in, or is it more the family experience? I mean,
for this particular thing, it's really the family experience. So yeah, we do have a couple of like even people who've approached us with that before and said like, oh, I took pictures of the bases and all that sort of stuff and everything. But this one is really specifically for the families. So yeah, but I know so many people have awesome photos of things that were going on.
Oh yeah, there's so many crazy photos out there of things that I've seen that people have you wouldn't expect them to have. And this is only for overseas, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the other thing, because I mean, obviously, similar things were happening in Canada, but this was just our kind of shout out to the, the people who crossed the pond and served over there, and then. There may be a possibility again with the digital thing of looking at moving around Canada. So people who are, relocated to the various, Air Force bases around here to serve and that sort of thing. So there might be future opportunities for it, but for the purposes of the floor, we've had to.
Yeah, you gotta bookend it some way, which is completely understandable. Just always like to get the information out there as best as possible. That's why we're live and can do this in real time. So that's great. So if anybody's watching and might not necessarily yourself, but if you know someone who might, because I know a lot of people have experiences that, it's linked down below. If I'm pretty sure it is, I'll double check when we log off. But it should be. But then again, the website is linked as well, and it's on there because that's where I got it from. So pretty easy to find. So that's good to say. So if that's okay, we have a few more questions left over. Sure. If that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Go back. Sorry, just trying to find where they started. Here's one about maritime and anti-submarine operations.
No, unfortunately, we didn't really have enough space for that. And we have an Argus. Sadly, so it's not. And no,
hard to miss, to be honest.
I will have a photo of an Aurora pilot if that helps. So Mary Cameron Kelly, who is about maybe 2 years away from having a full year in the air, flying Auroras for 38 years now. So, I don't think she'd fly in the Aurora the entire time, but anyways, pretty close. Close. So
that's pretty intense. Yeah, because I get asked that question fairly frequently, because I think there's a lot of interest from the Second World War, and then people know people who did that. The big experience for the RCAF in the Cold War period. Yeah,
and I will say, like on our VTOL and helicopter island, like we have a Sea King, so we do talk about that aspect of the operations. But unfortunately, most of the maritime kind of conversation is around the helicopters and stuff, not so much about the large aircraft that were used, but that's mainly just because of what's on the floor and visible. So
I made a joke about the Sea King not exploding in my face while I was there.
Well, I'll tell you, we've heard on multiple occasions that this one in particular was a hangar queen. So,
so may or may not, but definitely did make that joke on social media. Oops. Come on, they have their problems. This is a good one. I think we might have, I don't know if we talked about it directly, but Korea, because I just want to, again, that's the one thing I've been researching a lot, particularly lately, is the RCAF involvement in Korea. And yes, there is involvement in Korea.
Yeah.
It's not as we would expect it to be from the Second World War context, and then pretty much what is immediately, ongoing, which we already talked about with the First Air Division in Europe, Western Europe, and then after. It's not squadron based. So is that going to be part of it? Is there going to be, say, an individual profile? Is there a cool artifact you guys have other than the jacket? Is that going to be part of it? Or is it going to be, like, say, based on that personal story?
No, we do talk about Korea, and one of the reasons that it will get the kind of space that it has is because we have a Sabre and a MiG
Right.
15 together on the floor, right? So it's one of those things you can't not talk about it because of the airplane. So the Sabre kind of straddles that line between
Yeah, exactly.
NATO stuff and then the Korean War, but the MiG 15 is very firmly, rooted in that. So one of the things that we will be displaying, we talk about the 21
Ish.
slash 22, but not really because that person was already with the USAF anyways. But so the pilots, the RCF pilots, the fighter pilots that were on loan. So we will talk about their experience through Omer Levesque, who we have his teddy bear suit and helmet and stuff. So that will be on display. And then Byford will kind of cement the only kind of squadron-ish level participation in Korea, which was from 426 from a transport point of view. Then we're also going to I'm trying to source this painting that will kind of communicate the role of CP Air in airlift also, because that was a massive contribution to that. So there's one DC-4 from CP Air that disappeared. And so this painting is kind of trying to represent that, like the final moments of this plane before it's never seen or heard from again. And so, we're not going to be, we talk a little bit about the fighter commitment, the transport, the nurses from the medical side of things and stuff like that. So we're trying to pick out the kinds of commitments that were made in that conflict to sort of properly represent that, because I know it does get kind of lost in the shuffle a lot in terms of the historical discussion about the RCF and its commitments, because it didn't have that same level of action, I guess, as the Second World War, for example. So.
Yeah, I mean, like that's why I said the squadron thing, because I think just like I like to say, popular memory is the term I like to use because I think it's the best one that fits. Doesn't quite fit in that box of how we think about it. Again, we already talked about sovereignty issues with the DO line and the nukes, all that stuff. So it's so interesting but especially to read about these pilots. It's sort of a quick aside, but they're not part of the U.S. Air Force. They come in and they're all of a sudden leading squadrons, and they're leading flights, and it's great. And they're taking out MiGs on like their third or fourth flight. Like they're shoving them in there, and they're doing an amazing job. It's true. It's just why I want to get that question in there, because I think it's an interesting question, because again, it doesn't quite fit into the boxes we think they fit. But it's a fascinating subject, and I'm glad to hear that it's going to get that attention. Sorry, you said the painting, you're having trouble sourcing it, or do you guys have it, or is it somebody else?
We don't have it. It was commissioned for a book that I believe was never published, and the person who was working on it has passed away. So I don't know what happened to the paintings. So I'm in touch with the artist's wife. So I feel like if I'm going to get anywhere, then that's probably the place I'm going to do it. But it was just unfortunate timing.
Oh, because I was going to say if there's anything I can do to help, because I know
thank you.
I'm all over the place, especially from the art stuff. It crops up in very interesting places. One question here, and I think I might know the answer, but can't not, because it involves our only aircraft carriers. Naval aviation. Is there going to be models? Is it going to be something?
Not in the Cold War exhibit. But again, we have it near the VTOL island. So we have a model. Actually, it's a really beautiful model of the Bonnie. With a whole a suite of all the aircraft that served on the Bonnie.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So a bunch of them. So I mean, it's a very impressive model. It doesn't have enough. I will say, it doesn't have enough interpretation around it. But that is something that's kind of on our list to do, just to properly set that up and just talk about the aircraft carriers, talk about the fate of the Bonnie in the end.
Not the most not the most auspicious ends, but and speaking of ends, you're just setting them up yourself here. How do you mark the end of this? Well, actually, before we get into that, what is the end for the exhibit?
Well, that's it. and actually it was a little bit difficult for me because as somebody who spent a lot of time studying the history of Russia in general, I mean, there is an argument to be made that the Cold War never ended, right? So it's just like we're living in another piece of it, let's say. And so what I've decided to do was really just we start the story in 1945 when this uneasy alliance between the Allies, including the USSR, starts to break down. And then the Guzenko affair in Ottawa and that whole deal, right? So it just so we started there, and then we've kind of ended it with the collapse of the Soviet Union in '91. So just to so that we have an endpoint for ourselves, like as a filter. But we do have a couple of threads of things that happened during the Cold War that we kind of carry through to more recent years as well. So if there's a particular part of the story that kind of begins in the Cold War but ends somewhere else, so like the LGBT purge, for example, that's something that's firmly rooted in Cold War ideology and suspicion and general bigotry and whatever, but that kind of has an end after the fact, and then the apology after the fact and all that sort of stuff, right? So we will carry through some threads like that. Women in the RCAF also just kind of bring out some of these stories that, like, yes, well, like all this stuff started here, some progress was made. Obviously, if you've paid any attention to the news cycle in the last 3 years or whatever, it hasn't moved that far, but that's it. So
it'll be kind of more of a, in this frame, this question from David here is that still kind of going.
It's just we use 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, and then maybe everybody goes home, but still looking over the fence,
like, for a minute or two, or let's go third for
exactly.
Watch some TV in the 90s, and then everything blows up again.
Still healthy suspicion, unless you're going to be building the ISS with us. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. That's pretty much all the questions. I'm just trying to think if I had any others. No, I'm just excited to see, honestly, the final project, the final product. Sorry, because it's just I've known about this for a while, and the different iterations and the ideas. And museum nerd, I'm a nerd of many areas. They're all history related, obviously, but I love to hear the process and the behind the scenes. I love that stuff. So it's great to hear that. So thanks again. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it's been fun. I hope everything kind of, it's one of those things I will say one of the hardest things about being a curator at a museum, and I've done a lot of exhibitions, and what happens in the process from making something 2D to 3D is very interesting. And then sometimes, you walk around your space and you're just like, this was not how I pictured it being in my mind. And so anyway, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the end.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's limitations, it's money, it's all kinds of things. So I don't think anyone's going to be faulting anyone, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
But they do.
Well, they do. But I don't fault everyone.
I hear about it all. So. Yeah, which is great. I love the engagement. That's it. It's just like, it's nice that people like, and one of the things I think about Chasm in particular is that people are really invested in the collection, in the museum as a whole. Like we have a lot of really passionate people that that just care a lot about what we do, which is nice. So it's I'm sure there's not too many people, not too many museums out there that have that level of investment from their audience. So
not in this country, unfortunately. I was just overseas, and I'm kind of jealous. It's different. It's just so different.
I don't even think about that every time I go down to the Smithsonian or whatever. I always
not even talking about that. I'm talking about the Netherlands.
The Netherlands. Yeah, I know.
Don't even know the Americans. Don't even know.
Don't go.
Talk about blue sky thinking. You just can't even touch anything that they do. But so it looks like people are interested, and people want to know about the museum and everything. So hopefully this gets some bites on the photos, because I know there's people out there, and I'll push it again.
Thanks.
on social media again. And with this live stream now, if people have questions, I can say go watch it. But yeah, so it's something I am looking forward to again. Obviously, as an aviation nerd, just loving the real basics. I'm not into the technical stuff, but I just like looking at cool planes and learning stories. So it's what I love to do. So I'm excited to see it, and hopefully we can do something somewhat soon. In terms of the museum, but yeah, I wish it was opening in July. Yeah, me
Oh my
too.
God, I'm so glad it's not opening.
Me too, Chris. But no, just Chris, because I know Chris is
giving me heart palpitations.
he comes up in Ottawa and likes to come check things out. So
Nice.
we
Next July. Next July.
We go around and we have a plan to go around and look at stuff. But yeah, and hopefully we can get some. Well, Susan, you can come up to Ottawa anytime you want. We'll show you around. Susan's in the U.S. So yeah, it's hopefully we can get some non-Canadians to come stop by.
Yeah, that'd be super fun.
That'd be awesome. Anyway, so thanks again. I'm just going to do a quick sign off and then we'll say goodbye together.
Sounds good.
So thanks for Erin for coming on, talking about the exhibit and the in planning parts of this and what the ultimate goal is and what the museum has to kind of wrangle with. It's going to be a good one. But again, if you haven't heard of this museum and you're ever in the area, you should check it out. And when I mean area, I mean if you're in Montreal, come here. It's worth it because, as Erin was saying before we started, it's got some stuff that isn't anywhere else, and that is true. And we're hoping to maybe do something with that in the future. That's why I don't want to say what it is, because I want you to come back. Yeah, I can see Erin; she's agreeing, so that's good. Yeah, so thanks again, everyone, for watching and our little foray into the Cold War here. Nothing scheduled yet with Phil Blood. I got to talk to him again. I know he's on World War II TV tomorrow. Yeah, so hopefully we can get that whole show around the 12th SS and the whole commodification of that and all of that scheduled up again. So I'll let everybody know through a post and through social media about that. Other than that, if you're not subscribed and you're new, please subscribe. It helps. Liking and leaving a comment down below is extremely helpful to help the channel grow, and so we can do more and more of this stuff. So thanks again, everyone, for watching. So thanks again, Erin. I appreciate it, you coming on, giving a chunk of your evening. It's much appreciated by me and the guests. So thank you. Or sorry, the audience, you are the guests. Other than that, we're looking forward to the museum opening next year.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah, yeah. Don't get. You still got some time. You got lots of time. Anyway, all right, everyone. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Everyone, have a good rest of your evening. Bye, everyone.